Hello, welcome to Weave. I'm Jennifer England here on the traditional territories of the Kwanlundun First Nation and the Tan-Kwachan Council in Whitehorse, Yukon, Canada. I'm delighted to introduce to you two incredible guests, Lisa Gibson and Brooke McNamara, as we talk about and explore the concept of renewal in our lives, particularly in these times of intense isolation and demands of showing up to be our best selves. So Lisa Gibson is a transformative coach, a facilitator, and systems change consultant, specializing in leadership development and mindfulness for change makers. She's based in Vancouver and has spent the last 14 years as the director of Living in Community, where she's helped bring together diverse voices to address sex work concerns, centering and privileging those who'd engaged in sex work to find new and innovative solutions. She's also the founder and innovator for the Social Innovation Certificate at Simon Fraser University and Scale Your Impact, a community systems change certificate in Vancouver. And her collaborator here today is Brooke McNamara, who is an artist, teacher, and Zen monk, and incredible writer who's had authored 2 books of poetry, Bury the Seed and Feed Your Vow. She has taught yoga studies at Naropa University and dance at the University of Colorado, and has also developed 2 incredible online courses, one Summoning the Unseen, Poetry and Meditation to conjure up deep support and inspiration with her collaborator, Lauren Beale, and her second course, Right to the Heart of Motherhood, which I've had the privilege of taking, and it's incredible. So they come together as collaborators, and we talk today about renewal, and they've both co-created the Women's Ritual of Renewal, a seasonal online gathering for a year of wholehearted living for women to practice renewal together in community and alone. And so what I love about this conversation is they bring together the concept of renewal, not just as rest and rejuvenation, but also a fierce conjuring up of energy to meet the fullness of each moment. And so I hope you enjoy this conversation and think and reflect on what it might mean for your life and leadership at this time, where we can both summon the strength and rejuvenation and rest needed, and also tapping into the fullness of who we are and an incredible energy source that is always available to us. So with this, thank you for being here. Please share widely and enjoy this incredible conversation with Lisa Gibson and Brooke McNamara. Welcome, Lisa and Brooke, to Weave. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm excited for what conversation will unfold.
Yeah, well, I would love to dive in on this crazy time that we're in and the feeling that for so many of us, particularly leaders who are also parenting and working from home and caring for so many in our community and our families, you know, how are you navigating this expectation to keep showing up with your best self? It seems like so many of us are feeling both that pressure externally and internally. So maybe just see where that takes us as a starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can dive in first.
You want to start, Lisa?
Yeah, I can say a few things. Yeah, like what I notice is like when you ask the question, like the first thing I do is like take a deep breath, because I feel like that's what I'm doing a lot of lately. Like there's the things I have to do, but there's also an energetic kind of perseverance that I feel is like the question actually hits me in my body. Like it's like okay, another deep breath, right? Like the unknowability of this moment and the deep uncertainty is actually the thing that I feel like I'm primarily working with. So the showing up with my, keep continuing to show up to the moment and to like the parenting demands and just like the Zoom life that has become my reality, and the the unknowability, but just to keep showing up with the uncertainty. And so for me, it's that navigating, like, how do I keep fully being present, being here, and recognizing where I'm tired or what I might need to do, but not knowing like the directional nature, like that the loss of certainty, which I think is probably always there, but there's something about this pandemic moment that feels like it's palpable and heightened in a way that we can't ignore, because we can have some road marks going ahead. So a lot of like how I'm navigating that is like actually with myself and with like my body to keep showing up, and my breath to keep showing up, and to keep being present in the spaces and really feel into what is there and what I need to work with. So that's a place to start, maybe.
Thank you. Brooke, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm loving the invitation for the deep breath. That feels really good. And I noticed that when you asked the question, Jennifer, my first, like, Lisa had the deep breath, and I had this flash of like my most absurd moments. Like, I actually saw, the ways that, in a sense, the things that are propelling me and keeping me sort of knit together at my foundations and also available in the ways that I want to be are the same practices that have always supported me. It's like meditation, yoga, writing, relationship. It's the same core things. And there's a way where I almost get an image of like all these things, knitting me together to show up. I do want to show up as best I can to serve whatever the moment is, whether it's like getting my kids breakfast or teaching a class or conversation with my husband. But then, like Lisa said, there's not really a sense of that staying solid. I can feel that kind of crumbles, and that it's just like this very breathing moment to moment thing. Like I feel myself come together, and then I feel myself dissolve. And one of the ways that I feel that dissolution is like, there's just these hilarious, absurd, very humorous moments that I have where I saw myself, the way I exercise, I shared with you too last week, is that I run up and down the stairs of our house. So I like saw myself when you asked, how are you doing that? It's like, I'm running and I'm moaning and making these like crazy exhale sounds to release the anxiety and the buildup of fear or whatever the residue is of not knowing what the future holds for myself and my children and humanity and the earth. There's a lot that builds up every day. And for me, I have to laugh and cry and sweat. And so it feels there's an earnestness and a seriousness. And then there's also just an absurdity and like, I have to find ways to play and be really ridiculous. Like there's this part of me that is just, not perfect, kind of silly that is helping me release tension, I guess. That's what's coming right now. Yeah.
I love that the breath is an anchor for you in two different ways. Like for you, Lisa, you were just talking, just this, it was for you a release, the deep breath and the deep release of working with unknowability and unknowing and just the constant uncertainty. And what came up for me as you said that was just the certainty of the breath. That's what we can rely on in order to just, again, show up in whatever moment is arising. And then for you, Brooke, just how, the beautiful image of you running up and down your stairs and just like the big, crazy, like the moaning, ridiculous cardio on your stairs, and like your kids probably like, what are you doing? Or I want to do it with you. And trying to space, like what it just, I don't know about our listeners, but like my stairs in my house are this narrow little corridor, and like this, just this both the confining time that it feels like, how compressed, condensed we feel in this unknowability. And then at the same time, taking whatever space you can, whether it's a breath or whether it's into absurdity or playfulness, it just feels so human. Like what else? What else can you do to show up day to day?
So true. Yeah.
So what do you feel like, a little bit, Brooke, what you're leaning into these threads of, meditation, your writing, your yoga? What are both of you relying on, in addition to the breath, in addition to sort of expressing your, the absurdity and the playfulness? What are you relying on, and or what are your edges that you're feeling most right now?
Brooke, you want to go?
Sure. I named a handful of practices that for my whole life have consistently arisen as refuge. But when I really feel like what's the core of all of those right now, my honest answer is actually heartbreak. Like when I meditate, the most honest place I keep cyclically arriving at is a realization of like, I'm not sure what I'm going to keep trying to do my best to be of service to my communities and students and my family and my friends. And at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, like the most honest response is that my heart just keeps breaking. And when I sit down to write, I have this response lately when I sit down to create that I have no idea how to do it, which is awesome. I actually feel like that's it's kind of like that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, the Tibetan meditation teacher. He says chaos should be regarded as good news, I think, something like that. And when I hit a point in creative practice of not knowing how to do it, it feels like that should be regarded as good news, that I'm not on autopilot. And I keep feeling the surge to create, and then I sit down to do it and I don't know what to do. And then sometimes words come and sometimes they don't, but more often what's right there is again that same feeling of like pressure around my heart. And then if I allow myself to feel that, there's a lot of tears and a lot of feeling. And so in a certain way, whether I'm running up and down my stairs or doing yoga or writing or meditating or in conversation with people that I love, like you two, where it tends to direct my attention is to the necessity to host that, to witness that, to die to that. Like there's a resistance in me to really feel. And it's not always grief. Sometimes it is like that a lot is changing and a lot is dying and there is so much uncertainty. And mixed in there is a lot of deep care and wonderment and inspiration. So it's kind of complex. It's not just one thing, but at the heart of everything that I'm doing to support myself to show up, or at the heart of everything that practices me, is this invitation to let my heart break over and over and over. That's, maybe I'll pause there to see how would you answer, Lisa?
Yeah, can you ask the question just one more time? Because I was feeling into the heartbreak, which I'll touch into, but I just would love to hear the question just one more time.
Yeah. What are you drawing on in order to show up in the way that you feel is meaningful to you? And what are your edges in that? What feels like an edge for you?
Yeah. So I think that when you first asked the question, the thing that came up for me was I'm actually leaning into stillness. And so that like actually comes through my meditation practice. Like that, I notice when I wake up, the first thing I want to do, even though I've been still all night, is I actually want to get still. Like I want to be awake and still. And so there's something about the and it relates maybe into what you're talking about, Brooke, like that it's actually to feel what actually is here, and so, and sometimes that is heartbreak, and sometimes it's exhaustion, and sometimes it's that I don't want to be still, and yet there's like this deeper knowing about the kind of the perfectness of actually trusting what is here and what's here right now. And what's coming up for me right now is like today is it's the year anniversary since my partner's mother passed away. And she lives my partner's from California, and most of his family is down there. And so after she passed away, and we'd spent a bunch of time down in California before she passed away, with her, and just really nurturing and being in her sweet, beautiful company. And she passed away a year ago today. And then my partner went down there, and like there was a kind of a burial, and there was a process that happened. And really, as soon as he came back was when kind of COVID shut everything down. And so what I've noticed is like this moment, and I can feel it in her passing in particular, because there's this way in which like the grief or the heartbreak of the moment kind of got like dulled, or this thing of the pandemic, and in which we just have to keep showing up, actually it made it more difficult to actually find the particularity of the emotion. And so that all the plans that we had for like a celebration of life in the summer, and like these things we were going to do to actually be heartbroken together in an extended period, actually got hived off. And now they're kind of in a, like, how do we do that together? And we're going to do something tomorrow evening together on Zoom. And some of them, they'll be together, socially distanced, the ones that are down in California together. But there's this way that I feel like like our collective heartbreak is also harder to feel. And so I think there's something about the anchoring myself in stillness and in like what is really present, so that I can actually like peel back the layers where things can feel like I feel often a little stagnant these days. Like literally it's like I've got to move my energy, because I can't quite find the thing that needs to actually come through me. And so there's, I think that practice of my meditation practice, but it's also can happen when I'm walking in the mountains, and I'm, when I'm skiing, but like actually tuning into the stillness that's underneath of everything. And actually what's that, both my individual, but what's our collective feeling that we're all going through, and how do we part of it's actually just peeling back my own layers so I can even know what's there. So I think there's a way that my practice is to tune into the feeling state, and to tune into the fullness, not only just of myself, but also feel the collective moment, and feel the heartbreak and the frustration and the grief and all of that I'm feeling myself, but that I can also feel under the surface of our kind of collective humanity right now.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for reflecting on what you're grounding yourselves into. It feels like what's coming up for me as you both speak is just like this tenderized heart space of the heartbreaking, as you're talking about, Brooke, that is just not only the grief, but also the wonder. It just feels in some ways how when we can tune in enough to what we're actually witnessing and bearing witness to, there's a capacity to start to feel the nuances or the shape of both our individual or really personal heartbreak, but also, as you say, Lisa, like the collective. Mm-hmm. And then at times where we can't yet, sometimes you can't feel. Sometimes what I'm hearing you say a little bit is like where we all just sort of had to buck up with when the pandemic hit, right? Is like all hands on deck. In the unknowing, all you can do is sort of survive, and there isn't a lot of time and space for new ways and ritualizing being together. Mm-hmm. So it feels like both of you in different ways, this sort of tapping into, I'm imagining you, Brooke, in this beautiful writing space in the morning. I know you love to write. It feels very still to me when I think of you writing, coming to the writing page and you getting up in the morning to just be still and awake. Just feels there's a dynamism to both of you speaking to this awakeness of holding and being with the heartbreak and also the fullness of your own emotional experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not often, it's like, I want it to be still, like whatever my idea of stillness is, but actually my puppy is licking my face and then my kids are up and like laying on top of me, so there's also like the thing that I want, or that I kind of, it's like, I'm going to do this thing. And then it's actually like, how does stillness arise even in the chaos of what Trungpa's quote is like, actually, where is it that I find my center, even when there is no equilibrium? How do I actually also find equilibrium in the wildness of there's the bigger moment, but there's also like the microcosm of my household and my kids and the kind of the pulsing kind of mm-hmm. ways that I can't tell them when to get up, or I haven't been able to. My puppy doesn't know that it's meditation time yet. Like, she's still learning what meditation is, right?
Meditation means you're still enough that she can just lick you.
Yeah, totally. She's like, this is great, and then she's like, oh, I'm going to eat this thing. And then I'm going to go over, I'm like, she's like scratching at the door, or it's like she wants to destroy things, or she wants to lay on my lap, or she's, it's like really exciting because she's kind of got my full attention, right? There's like nothing else. So I can feel that, like the idea that it's also, that it's serene and that it should be a particular way. And then there's it's like the lived reality, right? It's like, here's my like nice Zoom background, but don't turn the camera too far that way, because that's right through all the laundry, right?
What pants I'm wearing, because they're like sweats I've been wearing for 3 days.
Totally.
Yeah. I've got the destroyed fluff of the puppy pillow also here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You can't see it because I've moved the camera in such a way. Well, that brings a question up for me around, you both have been working with this beautiful concept of renewal through your retreat and coaching work that you do on an annual basis now. And so I'd love maybe to just introduce the concept of, what does renewal mean to you both? Because I love that there's a little bit of a playfulness and a tricksterness even to the concept of renewal that I'd love you to speak to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Lisa and I co-lead a program called Women's Ritual of Renewal. Mm-hmm. And so the word ritual really points to that this is a practice that we do together and alone. So it's like individuals coming together, going into aloneness, but also creating a web internationally of practicing and making ritual renewal. And it's a year-long program of 4 seasonal half-day retreats. There's one coming up on March 7th on Zoom. And then coaching in between, and also inspirations and writing prompts monthly for people who sign up for the year-long program. That's the structure of it. And then the kind of heart or intention is for us to discover together in real time what renewal actually is. Like, we don't want to reinscribe old, tired ideas of renewal, because we're interested in what actually works for ourselves and for our participants. And so I think like one kind of metaphor that comes up for me is comparing the two. I have two sons, and it's when I compare their births and the way that I prepared for their births. Like the first one, I practiced relaxation and surrender only. Like I just really thought that was going to work. Like all I did was like listen to these awesome guided meditations of this woman talking about like the rainbow relaxation. And I would just like fall asleep to her voice, and it was awesome. I just really got better at relaxing. So I don't want to throw the maybe a kind of immediate and first idea of renewal can have to do with rest. And certainly there's value in that. And I certainly can continue to learn how to rest and relax. But rest only, when I did that as prep for my first birth, it set me up horribly. Like I was not prepared for the intensity and the rigor and the confrontation that birth was for me. And that reality is definitely compassionate, and it's definitely rigorous in my experience. And I would be hard pressed to find someone who would argue with me. Like life is rigorous. It's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. And it's compassionate. I believe it's both. And so for my second birth, long story short, I had a better idea of what I was in for. And so I was like, I'm going to practice relaxation and surrender. Yes. And I'm also going to train for the marathon that I know birth is in my experience. And so I was doing strength training and hiking and strengthening myself so that I could find my own edge for those rigorous moments. And then I could learn how to better surrender to the moments that called for that. And so I think for Lisa and me, we're interested in renewal as a whole concept. Not a concept even, but an inquiry of how can we challenge ourselves and how can we soften our edges so that, because sometimes for me, running up and down the stairs, even though it's painful and it feels intense in the moment, and I'm like screaming and, it's way more renewing than if I were to be like, I don't want to, I'm just going to lay down. For me, I have sometimes pushing myself beyond my own limits just a little bit in a way that is exciting and kind of dismantles me just a little so that deeper resources arise. For me, that's a big part of renewal. And it's setting myself up for a necessary dissolution of who I think I am. And that's when deeper resources arise. So I think also in the creative process, some of the poems that I've written actually have come from places where I'm like so bewildered and giving up in a certain way that something, but instead of going to take a nap, I'm like, I'm going to write. I have a couple poems that I didn't feel like writing, but I did anyway. And then something came through because I was so tired or so past my point of feeling able to write a poem, if that makes sense. And then something came through that I really feel is more valuable because it doesn't come from something I would identify as myself. So that's kind of a mosaic of perspectives, but it's all to say that we're interested in wholeheartedness, and whether that's wholehearted rest, really going there and letting our minds get quiet and really yield our whole being, or really like cohering our being toward, whatever the moment might ask of us. Lisa, I'm going to hand it to you and see if you can like weave that any.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, there's a quote that we love from Brother David Steindl-Rast, who says that, you probably know it, the antidote to exhaustion is not necessarily rest, but the antidote to exhaustion is wholeheartedness. And so I think this inquiry of like, actually, how do we, if exhaustion is our like the sickness, what's the medicine? And I think this sort of framing of wholeheartedness and how we're exploring renewal is really about tuning into what's needed in the moment. Now it might be that like cucumbers on the eyes and like a white fluffy robe. I don't have one of those, but I see them, on like in, magazines of renewal, like rest. And, it might be going to the spa, or it might be a nap, or it might be the deep rest that's required. And I think what we're interested in, and this comes also from our Zen practice, is actually meeting the moment and getting really curious about what's renewal in this moment. Because it's not renewal, what I need right now isn't what I needed yesterday or 5 years ago. And so it's actually continuing to show up fully and actually, I think, with curiosity and with a willingness to be surprised with what that might be. And so I've been like, I notice I'm tired. Like there's something about this pandemic that is, I'm exhausted. I feel like for lots of different reasons, but there's also like this strange tiredness that I feel that I don't have the same, I'm not experiencing myself with the same life force that I'm used to. And on the one hand, I feel like I need sleep and I need deep rest, but I also feel like I need to move I need to move the stagnant energy that's in my body from a year of being in front of my computer. And I'm exercising every day, but there's something about, the last week, one day I went for a bike ride and then a 2-hour walk with a friend. And then I went skiing in the evening and I was like, oh my God, I feel alive. Like, I feel like this is how this is also renewal. And I did sort of a lot. And on one hand, of physical activity, none of it was I wasn't being super hardcore about it, but there was something about, also just not just exercising or resting, but actually moving and actually being with the day. So there's something to me about, deeply listening to what is renewal like in this moment, and to keep holding it as a question and being surprised by how it might answer itself. And sometimes I don't know if it's renewal until after. Like I actually have to approach it and do the thing, but I actually might go, oh, I stayed up till 10:45 painting my house last night. And actually, I think it was renewal. Like, I think actually it was what I needed. Because I have really nice clean walls that were basically brown before. So there's, so this question of what is how do we actually hold, renewal, and how do we recognize it both in ourselves, but how can we support it in others? I think is this, maybe that's another part of the question, but it's, I think ultimately a renewal gets answered as it gets lived out, and it changes and can surprise you, by what it looks like.
Yeah. I love that you're both holding it as an inquiry. That firstly, I'm so attracted to that as a living question. And also that you're not caught in this binary between rest. Renewal means rest and rejuvenation, or often sometimes care for others. Like we can get stuck in this, we're either caring for ourselves or we're caring for others. And you're bringing in this quality of staying alive to what the moment is calling, and to the energetic request maybe that life is asked of you, but also trusting, even when you're tired, that there's something that's resourcing you from within, that if you just say yes to that you'll be able to meet the moment and be surprised after about what it enabled, either in you or in the broader field. So yeah, just on that note, I was just speaking of births, when my daughter was born, I remember I was I thought I was going to have the baby any moment. And the midwife came over, she was born at home, and was I was a little harsh, but she was like, you're only 2 centimeters dilated, honey. You have so far to go. And I was I am at my edge. I was and it's you got, it's I've got 8 centimeters to go. And I was
like I literally felt like that was as far as I could go, but I was like,
not fair.
No way back.
That's
Like,
not fair.
not fair. And like the baby's got to come out. Like there's not a way. There's no way around it. Like I couldn't. Like there's not like a different button. Now, yeah, there's different methods, but no matter what, there's an intensity of like birthing the baby. And so there was this moment where like I just was, and I had gestational diabetes, and my blood sugar was really high, and the midwife was like, if it gets any higher, you're going to have to go to the hospital. And I was like, can I swear? Anyhow, I don't know. I was like, fuck that. I'm like having this baby at home, and I like something happened. I just like turned my attention inward, and I don't know. I just went to like I accessed a different part of myself that I was like, oh, and so I can look back and go, that like 2 centimeters dilated was like, I was nowhere near the like what my edge and what my capacity was, but I was birthing, which is a form of renewal, but it was not the thing that I wanted or I thought it was going to look like. And so, but there was something that I could access. It didn't even feel like me. Like there was, so I think it's about where we're resourcing ourselves from as well. And so in that moment, I actually didn't resource myself from Lisa. It wasn't like what Lisa could do, but actually it was like it was what women have done. It's like birth. This is like, this is what my body knows how to do that. So there was a way I could just kind of settle back, and then it unfolded in the way that it did. And I did have a baby.
Yeah.
I love these birthing metaphors. And I want to presence actually my last interview with the poet Padre Gotuma. We talk about how, we can think of this as unprecedented times or as precedented times.
Yeah.
And brought up the AIDS crisis as an example, where a virus ravaged 35 million people around the planet, and that we can actually pay attention to history, just as what I'm hearing both of you say. In some ways, we can pay attention to our own histories, our own process of birthing, whether you're a mom or an adopted mom or a parent listening to this, where you can really draw down and reach into where there is a precedented experience of actually birthing something in yourself, discovering a capacity you never knew you had, that you only discover later. And that something I'm paying attention to what you're both saying. You said, Brooke, there's a dissolution of who I am or who I thought I was. And you were saying, Lisa, the kind of renewal I need now wasn't what I needed 5 years ago or even a day ago. And so what feels both you're drawing on, an experience, a profound experience of your own capacity that's Lisa or Brooke, and not Lisa and not Brooke.
Yeah.
And also that there's a dissolution of self that's also. So I'd love you to, I don't know if you want to speak to that, some of those distinctions, but that feels really important to me.
Yeah, that's where my attention was going also, is that hidden within the word renewal is the necessity for, if something's going to become new again, it has to die. So there is this like, it doesn't have to be a big dramatic thing like giving birth or like a big identity shift, although it could be. But just moment to moment, we can notice that that's happening subtly all the time if we let it. And that actually that's a great thing to be happening and to be participating with consciously, rather than I know that I am way more depleted and way more exhausted when I'm carrying around this like chunk of solid concept of Brooke or what I need to do or how I need to fix everything and save the world. Like that's really tiring. But if I start to notice that I'm a process, I'm not a single thing at all. I'm much more like an ecosystem that's overlaid with the ecosystem of Lisa and Jennifer, and that we're all like literally not who we were at the beginning of this conversation. And that when we allow those mini letting goes, then the mini renewals can happen. And that that can feel scary for sure in certain moments, like that moment of you're only 2 centimeters, and then like the Lisa of that moment that's like, I'm at my edge. Like that one actually somehow has to be let go for that deeper animal instinct or life itself to rise up. Like I so know that feeling of, there was a moment in my second birth where I just was hearing the words, it's not pain, it's power. It's the power of love. And I was like, holy cow, I am not my ordinary self. I am the power of love, birthing new life, you know? And so we're curious about that as an art form, I would say, and in our lives in the pandemic, and then also in this program that we lead. Our own experience is our laboratory, and then we want to offer space for people to explore in community with us. But how do we let go into the unknown and then rediscover who we are moment to moment and also seasonally? And what are the themes from nature and the themes from our ancestors and from the precedented grooves in history and in the human psyche that we can actually, orient to the theme come March of planting seeds, like, orient to themes that feel old and deep in our human collective. So I'm trying to point to the shadow, but also this beautiful, beautiful shadow, or this beautiful darker layer in renewal of that death is part of it, or decay, and that I don't want to we probably wouldn't name it Women's Ritual of Decay, but that is, that's a layer. And I don't want to shy away from naming that like, we're going to come together and sit quietly and let go. And we're also going to dance, and we're going to create, and we're going to go out in nature and all, but we're going to be participating in both of those, letting go and seeing what arises.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, Brooke, there's like the the non-separation of renewal, in like that we are also a part of the collective as well. And so part of the, like, I find myself attuning to, like, what is the renewal that's needed out there? Like there's my own like human renewal, and there's my family's renewal, but there's like these bigger, I think, questions that we're asking in culture right now. Like there's so much up around racial inequity and racial injustice, and actually that there's a renewal that is required also at a collective level. That's like, that is, maybe it's about rest, but it's also about reorganization. And I think that there's like these deeper questions of like, so if we're letting go of old ways, and we can't go back, but we can, I think that we can learn, and we can actually, lean into our ancestors and hopefully see that the patterns as they move forward. But as we attune to this renewal, that we actually also see that we can't be separated from our context and what the bigger moment that we're a part of. But we can trust things like, when you were saying, like, we're using the seasonal cycles because there might be uncertainty, but we know that even despite climate change, there's some pretty big patterns of seasons. Like there are crocuses that have bloomed in our, in my front yard, and there's these little purple, I think they're crocuses, these little beautiful purple flowers. And then the white flowers will come up soon around the trees. And then the tulips will come up. No, the daffodils, and then the tulips. Like I kind of know the cycles of what is going to emerge in my little garden, in my little kind of home. And so there's also, what are we going to water, literally, like, and how do we, how can I do that here, and like me and Brooke can do that with this beautiful collective of women that we're gathering. And then I think we're also holding, how do we lean into these, like what needs to be renewed more broadly, like in our collective spaces, like for these bigger, to be in right relationship with ourselves, yes, but also the histories that we are a part of, and maybe inculcated in, we're a part of, and what needs to be oh, yeah, zone that's different than this moment.
No, I thank you for really weaving together both the individual concept of renewal with the collective, because I think in our separation from one another, we feel so much our closeness and our interdependence, in this time of the pandemic. So there's this paradox of being more alone and yet feeling more connected in some ways, or really attracted and needing a sense of belonging and community. And so because of that, the questions that we're living around inequality, for example, or increased racial tension, I mean, we're being asked to, how am I being asked to participate in creating renewal at the community level or at the societal level as well? So I love that you're weaving those things together. And what I'm listening for is just sort of like you started with the breath, Lisa, at the very beginning, around how the breath is an anchor for you. And then you're also talking about what are, despite the unknowing and the uncertainty and the complexity and the fear of the pandemic at this time that we're all feeling, what do we know, and what can we know through deeper listening? And yes, it's some of those familiar, beautiful seasonal cycles that you talked about, and the flowers that come. I love that we can anticipate and know which plants come out first in the springtime, and then deeper from that, the sort of ancestral knowing that you're talking about, those precedented and the present, what we can learn from history, and weaving those together.
Yeah, and it comes to me also that like renewal can be a sort of smooth and beautiful reemergence, and it also can be, there's a place for where it's more something that we're willing to fight for. Like, if we really are going to look at what it systemically needs to decay, and then what we would like to plant seeds for and have grow, that's not just like a passive thing. There's also a place, whether it's personal or in our family or collectively, in terms of inequality and oppression, and what do we want to see? What's our vision? What are we willing to fight for? Who are we willing to fight for? And so I think we're really interested in a rich, complex, lived experience of renewal, and that it's not just this pretty passive thing, but there are moments where we're willing to put a stake down and embody Kali, or some kind of fierce energy, like something new needs to be born. And I don't want to center my whiteness in that, or however we're gonna voice our perspective, that there is a place also for some fight energy.
The back to the, because it's the metaphor we're using, the birthing metaphor, it's not what I saw in movies growing up, and then you've got a baby. It was like it was messy, it was bloody, it hurt. And so that kind of question of what actually there can be, it can hurt in renewal, and it actually maybe has to hurt, that might be that in order to relieve some hurt, or to bring some life in, that maybe I actually have to hurt or step back or behave in a different way. So I think that piece becomes really important. What is it that we're willing to take a stand for, and that we actually can see there's a clear seeing. Renewal allows us to have more clear seeing around what it is that we want to choose and put our life force behind. And then that renewal, to trust what is going to be birth. It might look not as we expected. It might not be all, sweet and amicable, but there's actually we're in the trenches, and it's gritty, and we actually have to have hard conversations, and I have to face myself and maybe my privilege and my discomfort, or actually not having a voice at times. So there's it moves in different ways, and that can all be an expression of renewal, really. It makes me think of the birthing image. I'm realizing I didn't mean for us to be in the territory, but I just want to name Valerie Kaur's work, because she so beautifully talks about that, we're in this possibly we are dying, but possibly we're also giving birth to something new. And so I'd love to
call her in. And then I also, when you're talking about the pain, Lisa, like renewal can be painful. I think of Resmaa Menakem's distinction between clean pain and dirty pain. Like how beautiful the pain of getting into right relationship with, how we distribute resources and allocate power, and that might feel painful, and that might be just the right thing.
Yeah.
If it's aligned, and that's part of our process, is getting clear with our vision, so then our actions can line up with that. And that pain could be just so the right thing, as opposed to the dirty pain of like continuing to pretend everything's okay. And just that dull ache of like, the things are not how they should be, or how they could be in a more beautiful, just, true expression of our humanity collectively.
Yeah. And in the social justice spaces that I'm in, people are exhausted a lot. Like there's so much burnout in a lot of these spaces where renewal isn't valued, and therefore actually it gets tied up in the work. Like the burnout and the exhaustion actually becomes the methodology for the work. Like, and so it can actually, it's like the individual pain can actually start to play out in the collective, or the ways that people are resourcing themselves. There's nothing there. So it ends up that sometimes the relational domain can be really, really tricky to navigate. And so that this space of renewal is actually becomes really critical, so that we're actually fully able to show up and with what we need to actually face what needs to happen in any one moment. And that's maybe particularly true when you're working for social justice, but when you got nothing in you, and when there's, when it's just bottomless, that the exhaustion, it becomes very difficult to find and to be in that kind of right relationship that we're speaking of.
Yeah, I love the fierceness that you both are bringing into this concept of the inquiry of renewal. So the fierceness just feels so enlivening to me, and welcoming pain and working with the birth metaphor, and also this, bringing that distinction between clean pain and dirty pain, and that, the provocation or our willingness to say yes, to our full capacity, like what's possible, even when, and accepting it just feels like, what you're doing in your work is you're just opening up the door to absolutely the fullness of one's experience, and not privileging and packaging and distilling it into these neat boxes. The rule's going to be this, and here's how we're going to rest, or here's how we're going to play in the box of social equality and racial justice. It's like, it just feels like this beautiful opening into all of it that requires a total fierce energy and commitment to be with what is, and to dissolve the self in that moment to moment. Okay, I'm willing to let go again and again. And then this really rooted, like I'm tapping into something that's way bigger than me. So thank you both. I feel like there's like a part 2 emerging in terms of this is, I feel like I don't want to end.
We're just getting going or something here. Yeah.
Yeah, just a really incredible dynamic space. And in a way, I often say post-holding. Like, what does it mean to be a post-holder, to hold the space in a time like this that is so fraught with our own, deep grief and challenges and collective, and at the same time, enables us to flow, rather than just get bound up with our own inner constrictions. And it feels like your work, both of you, what I love about what you bring to the world is just this incredible depth and willingness to be heartbroken and to be still, even when you don't want to be. Yeah, so thank you for being here on Weave, and I'm excited about a potential part 2.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you for hosting and for weaving us together. For, I like the name of the podcast, and I would, I think maybe a place or a final thing I'll say is that one of the practices of renewal is also like this. Like, I know that I actually feel renewed through the conversation. So deep, authentic, contact and being in relationship with others is actually incredibly renewing. And so finding those ways, even if it's in a 2-dimensional Zoom space, like actually to feel both of you actually enlivens me, it actually, the kind of stagnant kind of energy that I have felt or felt this morning, I can feel that dissipating, and actually I can feel a different kind of life force that's present through the conversation.
Yeah, I feel that too, for sure. And it just, one final distinction from my side is like that, there's these practices of renewal. There's like the content, there's all the stuff we talked about. And then there's also just that regardless of what we're doing or saying, there can be an enactment of renewal, that we can always just have the intention that even in this tough conversation or this awesome conversation or this exhausted preparing of this meal, I'm going to intend renewal, and then to see how that enactment can occur regardless of the content, regardless of the practice. So there's both. And we like to include conversation is a space where renewal can occur. And then in a conversation, we can also intend that it be renewing, and then it's even more so. And so this was definitely that for me. I hope that made sense.
Totally.
Yeah. And it just brings right that point of the possibility of surprise.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing that Brother David talks about and your work in wholeheartedness is that there's always the possibility of surprise. No matter how much we think we've figured it out ourselves, the other person, or our social context. And
totally. I believe that wholeheartedly. Like we don't even know what renewal is or what it might be until we just start to ask, and then be available.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for being here. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.